Hey everybody, my name is Ted Forbes and welcome back to another episode of The Art of Photography. And today we're going to talk about medium format photography. We're going to show some medium format cameras. And this episode was more or less, it's an extension to the last episode in the sense that we did toning, which is really the last stage of the entire printing process, where we were toning some little small contact prints that were all done with a medium format camera using organic materials. So in our case it was tea and coffee. And it got me thinking, I don't think I've ever and I looked it up, I have never talked about medium format specifically. We've talked about twin lens reflex or TLR cameras. We've talked about the Holga before. But in terms of 120 as a medium and what your options are as a photographer, I think this is an important thing to discuss on here. And what's interesting to me is, you guys who have watched the show before understand my tastes, and I'm really into everything. I love 35 millimeters of format still. I love 120 or medium format, which we're talking about today as a format. Large format has its place, digital has its place. And I think one of the exciting things to me about photography is that we're living in this age where really all this stuff is at our disposal and it's at our fingertips to use. And as a photographer, if you really love photography, why not exploit all this stuff that's come before you and try to figure out how to put your stamp on it or what your signature is into that type of photography. And one of the things I love the most about medium format photography is for me, this was several years ago, well, by several I mean a lot of years ago. I think medium format was one of the things, because it's a larger format than say 35 millimeter or what a digital sensor does. So the cameras that are available for medium format historically have been a little clunky, and there is generally some kind of give and take that is involved in something you give up, but something you gain back. And we're gonna go through some cameras today. I'm gonna show you these things. And sometimes that's things like, through the lens metering. Sometimes it's things like autofocus, and you learn how to kind of get around those. But I think for me, when I got into medium format and started shooting on some of these cameras, the thing is like, you've got an image that you're taking in mind, and I think you could kind of even make a connection back to the composition masterclass we did on gaining your style as a photographer. But there's something you're going after, and because of the nature of the camera, generally there's some kind of trade-off involved. Either it won't do macro, or it won't focus close enough, something like that, or metering's an issue, or whatever that is. And medium format, for whatever reason, seems to be kind of this weird section of photography where I really learned how to become a better photographer, not only creatively, but also technically. And I think both those things are important. They both work in tandem, they both go hand in hand. And so what I want to do is, this is, you can think of this as part one. We're going to do the next couple episodes on this. And what I want to do is really something where we start with the camera and shooting pictures in the negative, and we take that all the way to the final print, which we kind of did in the last episode with the toning. But anyway, bear with me. And so today I want to talk about medium format cameras, and I've got some stuff to show you. We're going to open up the camera closet, we're going to take a look, and we're going to check them out and kind of see what's going on, and maybe make some suggestions. So come on over with me, and let's look at some cameras. Okay, so we're going to look at some medium format cameras now, and I'm going to show you kind of a wide range of stuff. We're going to start with something that's very inexpensive. We're going to start on the very low end just to show you that you can get in here for very little money at all. And we're going to move up to some stuff that'll give you a little bit better image quality. But if you've never shot medium format film before, this is what a roll of medium format film looks like. It is basically, it's a lot bigger than 35, so you're going to have a much bigger negative. And it shoots onto these spools, and this is an exposed roll. This is Kodak Plus X that is ready to be developed, and that's pretty much how it works. It rolls up onto here, and there's actually a paper with a black back on it, and it holds this light tight up against the rim of the spool there. So that's what you're dealing with medium format film. It's a roll, so there are different aspect ratios, depending on what the camera is that you shoot. A lot of people associate medium format with square format, and a lot of cameras do shoot square images, but that's not exactly true. For instance, this first camera we're going to look at shoots basically a 6:9 ratio rather than 6:6 centimeter. So anyway, let's look at some cameras here, and I'm starting with a $5 camera here. This is an Ansco Cadet B2, and it literally is just kind of a cardboard camera with a basic spring shutter, and it's got a meniscus lens, which basically means one element. And if you think you might be able able to use these to frame up. It has these little windows here that just, it's a little mirror, and they're reflex windows that, you know, if you're, depending on whether you want to shoot portrait or landscape orientation, it's got 2 windows for it. And that's really all it is. And I got interested, I mean, you can find this camera for about $5 usually, thrift stores, eBay, things like that. I picked up this camera, and it was kind of a decoration in my house for a while. And there's a wonderful book that I was reading early on, and it was a book that was published probably in the 50s or the 60s, and, you know, it has a lot of recipes for making your own developer and stuff. And they were saying, you know, if you really want the true test of being a photographer, try and shoot on a box camera. You should be able to get sharp images. And I decided to try it out, and lo and behold, this is an amazing looking camera. It's not, I mean, it is because of the single element lens of the toy camera or the plastic camera variety, but it really does make really good pictures, and they're surprisingly sharp. You know, all that to say. Anyway, so this is probably the cheapest way you could possibly get into medium format. We're looking at about $5 at the most here. If anybody's charging you more, then they're ripping you off. So, but very basic camera. You put the film in the back, it loads, rear loading. You take out this huge compartment in here, and you spool your film up onto that, and after you take an image, here's the shutter. You will wind it to the next one. You look in the little red window back here, and the back of the paper has numbers on it to show you what frame you're on. And this shoots a rectangular 16:9 image is what you're looking at here. So that's the very low end. I think the next step up from that you can probably do, and I'm not going to cover this too much because we've talked about Holgas a lot on this show before. This is my Holga, which is a modified Holga, actually. It's an older stock Holga that Randy Smith at Holga Mods, if you go to holgamods.com, I'll put that link in the show notes, made. And again, it's you know, I think the pluses to this camera is very inexpensive. You're looking probably about $30 or something for something like this. If you have Randy modify one, it's going to cost more. But I have this set with a bulb shutter setting, and I have a cable release on here, tripod socket for doing night shots as a flocked interior, just to keep things from reflecting. And surprisingly, this camera does pretty well. Now, the downside is it's a cheap plastic lens, and so the image quality isn't as amazing on this as something that we're going to get into in a second with like a Hasselblad or something like that. However, if you want a cheap, inexpensive way to have some fun and get into medium format and learn a few things, I think the Holga is a wonderful option. Interestingly enough, after Randy started doing a lot of these modifications a long time ago, Holga, the company that makes them, actually started building them into the cameras. I still love Randy's work better. He puts a close focus on here, so I think you can actually get up to 2 feet. There's an aperture ring in here. Anyway, very cool camera, and I won't say too much more about it because we've covered Holgas before, so if you haven't seen those episodes, I'll link those up in the show notes. The next step up from that I want to show you, we've talked a little bit about TLRs before, is the Seriflex. And the Seriflex, rather than something like a Rolleiflex, I've decided to show you because this is a very cheap camera. I think you get these for around $10. And all of a sudden, you're up into at least making sharp images. It's got a Vollensack lens on it. It's very sharp. It's, you know, arguably not rivaling something like a Rolleiflex, but then again, the benefit here is that you can get in here for very little money. And this is one of the first serious medium format cameras I bought a long time ago. These were made in the USA. Oh, I'm thinking around the 1940s, 50s, somewhere in there. It's built like a tank. It's largely metal. And, you know, it's a wonderful camera. It's got a viewing lens and a taking lens. And like we talked about in the TLR episode, you open the top and you view through, and that's kind of how that works. The downside to these is, one, they're clunky, and two, the shutter speeds are a little bit limiting. 200 is your top shutter speed. You do have a bulb setting if you need long exposures. 3.5 is the maximum aperture on the lens. And I think a major downside to these, and you know, you're not out a lot of money, however, they're old, and some of these shutters get old, and this is a self-cocking shutter, so you just fire it every time, and you don't need to wind it. What happens on here is sometimes, like on this camera, the slower shutter speeds, like 1/10 of a second or 1/25 of a second, will stick, and they randomly will stay open for 6 seconds sometimes, or 4, or 2, or sometimes actually the right speed. So that's one thing you got to watch out for. But at, you know, the price point, you know, buy a couple and find one that works. It's really not a big deal. If you want to step up from that a little bit, I think the next logical place to go is something like this. This is a Pentacon 6. And Pentacon was a company that made cameras, I believe, all the way up till about 1990. These were made in East Germany back in the day. And these were produced, you know, they started really in the I'm going to get the dates wrong on this, but the key point of production on these was, the 1950s into the 60s, which was really the golden era of lens production, I think, for any camera, 35 millimeter, medium format, large format. The Carl Zeiss lenses were doing some wonderful things with multi-coating, the design of tessars. This is actually a Flectagon. This is a wide angle. And the Pentacon 6 works, it's somewhere it acts between a twin lens reflex and maybe a SLR, like, your digital camera or maybe your 35 millimeter camera. It actually has the viewfinder on the top. It is a reflex, and when you cock the shutter on here, it actually opens that up and you are able to view through the lens and focus and do all your work in there. It has a mirror that comes down on that. So for close focusing, and you can see these cameras kind of slow you down a little bit. You have a wide range of shutter speeds on here. I'll show you how this works too. This actually loads the film and works just like an SLR camera. And sorry, mine sticks sometimes, so let me get that open. And literally here it is. There's your shutter curtain back here, so when I wind to take the next shot, you're actually going to see the shutter curtain wind, and it's probably going to move too fast, but when I take the image, shutter moves back. And so it's big and it's clunky. Some people have reported that they have problems with the frame spacing. I think that's generally due to the fact they probably haven't loaded the film correctly, so make sure you do look at a manual. They're available online, generally for free, and it's a very cool camera. It's a little big, it's a little bulky, it's a little awkward, but what's cool about this camera is when Pentacon started producing these, this was one of the first cameras with, where they were experimenting with modular design on these. And so literally there are a bunch of different lenses. There's an entire range of lenses as long as they will fit this Pentacon lens mount. The Russian cameras, some of the later ones, the CM series of Kievs and stuff like that, you can use those lenses as well. As long as it has the Pentacon 6 mount, you're in good shape. And literally you just pop the lens in there and then you twist the collar and tighten it up. Sorry, I can't do this from across the room. And you are good to go. The other cool thing is I have some of the lenses and some of the modular things that you could do with these. They're extension collars, so if you want to do macro photography, I actually have a bellows set as well. Very cool stuff. They came stock with an 80 millimeter lens, which is pretty standard for medium format photography. That's going to be the equivalent focal length of a 50 millimeter if you're shooting 35 millimeter film, or on your DSLR if you're shooting full frame, or on a DSLR if you're shooting an APS size sensor with a crop factor. This is going to be more like a 35 millimeter lens on something like that. So it's the 50 millimeter that comes with it is decent. This is actually the Flectagon, which is the wide angle, and this is a 50 millimeter lens. Don't get confused, which becomes wide on the medium format because of the focal length and the size of the negative that you're shooting on. And there's a portrait lens. I have a 180. They made them longer than that, and I believe maybe a hair wider than that as well. So there's a lot of options that you can find, all of them used at this point. When Germany reunified, I believe Pentacon, the whole entire factory was shut down and kind of sold off to various things. So, they're not available new anymore, but you can find them on the used market, and I think you can basically get into a camera for under $300. And lenses are going to be priced depending on how rare the lens is, what the condition is. This one's in really nice shape, and it's a beautiful lens. I mean, it rivals the quality, I think, of the Hasselblad cameras. So anyway, that's the next step up. Now let's go ahead and go to the top of the list that I'm going to show you today, which is an actual Hasselblad 500 CM. And actually this body is a CX, but we'll get into that in a second. The Hasselblad, also from the golden age of lens design and camera design, came out of Sweden, designed by Victor Hasselblad. And it really is still kind of the standard for medium format. There's a lot of options that are available on these. They even made it was something they called a flex body up until a couple years ago, and there's an arc body as well. And basically what it is they sub this middle part out for a series of bellows so you can do camera movements. So it acts like a medium format, well, it acts like a large format camera, but you're shooting medium format and it's a smaller size. The Hasselblads are completely modular. You have the film back, which you hit the release on and take that off, and you can get multiple film backs. The advantage to this is that you could load one with color, one with black and white. You could load them with different film speeds, keep them in your camera bag. They have a little dark slide on here. This one isn't loaded with any film, but you're going to remove that to shoot the picture. And that is one thing that's very cool. And the newer Hasselblads have digital backs that can go on these too. So you could shoot film or digital with the same camera, which is pretty cool. So you would remove the dark slide once you have the back attached, and you're able to shoot from there. So that's basically one of the advantages of shooting on the Hasselblad. Also, because it's modular, let me take this off again, I'll show you. You actually can detach the viewfinder. This is a through the lens viewfinder, and there's a waist level that you can attach to it. And also the variety of lenses that you can buy for this. I mean, you know, again, they come standard with the 80mm focal length, and this is a really old one. It's one of the old silver designs. Most of the newer ones are black. Excellent, excellent image quality. You know, this is really about as good as it gets. Now, that's the upside, is that, you know, this camera is amazing. There's a lot you can do with it. All of the flower shots that we did in the last episode that I showed, those little contact prints, were done with this camera, and I actually use those with the flash sync. The upside is you get great images. The downside is even used, you're going to have to pay a little bit more than any of the other examples that I've showed you. You're probably looking at upwards of in the $1,000 range US dollars to get into one of these used. The other thing you need to remember on these is that if they're old, they're going to require being serviced from time to time, so just something to plan into it. But they're beautiful cameras. They're amazing. Once you have it serviced, it'll last a while. And there are various models which all kind of do the same thing. The other interesting thing too is the shutter is actually in the back of the lens. It uses a leaf shutter, much like a TLR camera does. And the advantage to that is there's no camera shake, so at slower speeds you don't have mirror slap or anything like that. It's you know, and actually there is a second shutter because you do have a mirror in here for the reflex, but there are ways to do lockup on that, and you can take really clean images. So the shutter is on the lens on these, which is fairly interesting. So the bodies don't do a whole lot. The classic models was like the 500 cm or the 501 cm. This is a 503CX, which is a newer one, which supported flash. Now, I bought this from a friend of mine who had a photography studio, and that's why it says GBA all over it, but they happen to have this body because they used it with flash systems, so this is the one I went with. So I bought mine used, and it was very affordable, and I have never looked back. I absolutely love this camera. It is a little bit designed to be a studio camera. You can hand hold it, but it is kind of like holding a rock, and you know, that's a little bit of a downside because it's hard to use as, you know, something like street photography. I see people do it. I even had a friend who shot weddings with these for years, and had the big, you know, gun rig with it with the flash on the top, and made some beautiful images with these. So anyway, you know, that's it. And you know, I tried to show you, I'll compare the first and the last here, at two different price points you can get into medium format photography. You can spend $5 over here or a lot more. Either way, I think the important thing is to, you know, make sure you're learning with this stuff and that you're doing something that's improving yourself as a photographer, and also note the kind of images that you want to make. I mean, a box camera is going to be very limiting. It's a fixed shutter. That's another downside. You got to figure out what the shutter fires at, and they're old. So mine is about a 20th or a 30th of a second, somewhere in there, and that you don't have any control over that. No control over the aperture. Whereas the Hasselblad, you have a lot more control over things. But it depends on what kind of stuff you want to make, what kinds of stuff you want to do. Also pay attention to aspect ratio. This is a 6x9 camera, and there are nice, expensive 6x9 cameras as well. Fuji makes a couple. There are other excellent companies. I don't own any of their cameras. Fuji's one of them. I think Mamiya is another one out of Japan. There's certainly Bronica, etc. And anyway, so just experiment, explore around, find, you know, a rig that suits you, and get to learn it and get to use it. And that's the most important thing. And learn how to, you know, get the images that you want to make out of these things. Okay, so we've looked at some cameras, and I hope that inspires you on some level to maybe experiment with your own work and with what it is that you use and what kind of tools you use. And maybe what I'm saying is maybe that inspires you to get into medium format photography somewhat. You know, I think the amazing thing for me is, one, the learning potential that you have in this, and two, the fact that, you know, if you consider like a low end to medium price DSLR, and for that same price you can buy a scanner, a medium format camera of some type, you can get your film developed, you can send it off to a lab, or you can watch previous episodes and do it yourself, which I'm a big proponent of, and I really recommend that. And if you visit our website, theartofphotography.tv, you can see the show notes below, and or if you're watching on iTunes, I'll put the show notes there as well, and we will, I'll link back to those episodes so you can check it out. But medium format is obviously very special to me in that sense. I think bang for the buck, the quality of images you get, the fact that you get all the cool things about working with film, but then you get the resolution and the quality of working with a digital camera. You know, to me, it stacks up into something that's really I think it's important to any photographer. And, you know, like I said before, it's like, you know, you've got this whole history of photography before you. Why not try to use some of these things? And I think that's really important. I want to end the show on this, and I want to just give a thanks to some of you. Well, actually, thanks to all of you for watching the show. And a couple episodes ago, I did some show updates, and I reiterated once again that it does cost some money to run this, and that I am a one-man show. This is me and a camera. There's nobody else filming. There's no production company. I hope I create that illusion, but I'll be honest with you, that is not there. And some of you stepped up and made some donations this month that made it all possible. And I want to thank you all very much from the bottom of my heart for supporting the show and all that good stuff. So anyway, remember to visit our website, which is theartofphotography.tv. You know, we have all these episodes that we do on a weekly basis, and there's been other things that we've done. We've done one of the Masterclass Live editions. I'd like to do another one, hopefully this year. They're kind of hard to get to, and they take a lot of time to plan. So if you're waiting on that, please be patient. And, you know, between the AOP extras and the vlog editions and all, we've got them all on the website, and you can see more stuff there. So anyway, guys, thank you once again. I hope you found this episode inspiring, and thank you once again for watching The Art of Photography. I'll see you next time. Thank you.